Hello, everybody. My name is Ilya, and I'm the CEO of PouchNation, the leading cashless and guest management system in Asia. And welcome to our Event Tech Asia podcast. And I have a special guest today, Kenneth Tan from BookMyShow. Hi, Kenneth. How are you?
Hi, Ilya. How are you? I'm good. Yeah, would love to meet you in different circumstances over a beer. But, this is as good as it gets, I guess.
Yes. We were just chatting that, obviously we're still all on Zoom and still remotely, but obviously we're looking at the situations to change soon. So fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fantastic. So Kenneth, obviously now you are the CEO of BookMyShow Southeast Asia, which is one of the leading ticketing companies in Southeast Asia, in Asia in general. So would love, however, to uncover a little bit and go a little bit back in time. I know you are a veteran in the industry. You probably have like the most amount of experience among all of us here. So would love to actually go back in time and ask you, like, how did you end up choosing this career? How did you end up doing ticketing in Asia, and what was it back then, right? Because probably you've seen it all.
Well, that will kind of reveal my age, but it all started, many years ago. And I was actually a tech guy. So I was an engineer developer. And my last role that I got in touch with this industry was helping the government convince and persuade the travel and leisure industry to adopt internet and technology.
Wow.
Now the phrase adopt the internet may be quite foreign to people nowadays, but I'm talking about at least 25 years ago.
Wow.
When, not many companies are selling anything through the internet yet. And there was this drive by the Singapore government to push the entire industry to adopt. So I was looking after the travel and the leisure industry. And that was how I got to know about events and ticketing. Because I was trying to convince and matchmake volunteers who develop websites with show promoters, whether they are theater groups, they are concert promoters. And you can't imagine how difficult it is just to convince them to print their URL when selling tickets instead of the number.
Well, those were very different times, right? Like obviously, like online ticketing was non-existent, and but how? Like, tell me more. Like, how were? I mean, we're still concerts, right? Obviously, concerts are not new, right? So it was everything like purely paper-based, right? But where would you go? Like, what were specific outlets where you buy the tickets? How was it really done? I'm really curious.
So at that time, the ticket sales were mainly through call center and physical outlets. So it's still computerized, but it's physical ticket, and nobody goes. I mean, there's no concept of internet ticket buying.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time, I was trying to convince a couple of ticketing companies to adopt internet and say that, that's the future. And we had to do a lot of funding and convincing just to get them to switch to having the internet website.
Wow. And obviously at that time you were with Systic, right? So you were, or did you already join Systic, or was it even before joining?
It was even before Systic. I was with at that time it was called the National Computer Board.
Okay.
In the industry, the cluster that's called tourism and leisure. And that was how I got to know Systic and the other ticketing companies. And so we convinced Systic to start building the first internet real-time ticketing in Southeast Asia.
Wow. So that's very interesting, right? So Systic was the first company in Southeast Asia to actually do real-time.
Even before cinemas. So at that time, when cinemas and events ticketing companies start adopting the internet, ticket sales has a small fine print that says, we will confirm with you within 3 days. So people will enter the information, and somebody in the back end will print out all the information and then process the tickets and then email back to the customer and say, okay, your tickets are confirmed. It is row C, seat 11 and 12. It wasn't real time.
So you could not even pick where you want to sit, right? Or maybe
obviously not. At that time wasn't. So at that time, we helped Systic start the first real-time internet ticketing. And it was after that I told them that actually there's a lot more you guys could do. And the GM of the stadium at MC6 was still a department of the indoor stadium.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So I was chatting with the general manager and said, why don't I come over and let's figure out how to do this.
So that's how it all started, right?
That was how it all started. Yeah.
But then also, I mean, obviously throughout your years in SysTech, you did amazing, not only, at utilizing the technology for Singapore, but also growing regionally, right? I remember you were telling me that you had license agreements with Macau and other countries, right? So you really went and exported that tech outside Singapore as well, right?
Yeah, so I've always liked to be in the product side. So when I first joined SysTech was still licensing a software from another country, from another system provider. So after I joined them, I suggested the idea of owning your own technology. Let's build our own. So we did that. And from there, we started talking to other companies who wanted a ticketing system as well. So hence, at that time, we expanded into China, Macau, Hong Kong, and even Australia.
Wow.
And at one stage, even Japan as well was providing access control for, I remember the Tokyo Dome.
Okay.
Sending 4 teams. Yeah.
Well, Japan is an extremely big market for concerts and festivals. I think it's like Tokyo is the second city in the world by the amount.
Oh yes.
Right.
It's a huge market. It was quite amazing that we managed to get a deal there when we can't even speak Japanese. And I remember the first meeting I had with them, they didn't ask about our technology. They said, "Can you speak Japanese? Have you worked with any Japanese companies? Can you drink?"
That's interesting. Well, look, in our profession, sometimes it's a lot about relationship building, right? We know that, in dealing with promoters and event organizers, it's not, you cannot find them like just simply online, right? You need to wine and dine and meet them and build those relationships that obviously, on the other hand, last for a very long time, which is also great, right?
And you need to spend time to understand one another, to really know what is their pain points.
Correct.
So that you know how to address them, how you solve their problems. So it's all about solving problems.
Yeah, events, look, big, especially large scale events, they usually never go according to plan, and there's always that goes wrong. So you better have a good relationship and be a good problem solver, because otherwise it can be really troublesome, right?
Yeah, and during that time when you're providing a system so far away, I remember one of the first places we provided the system for was China, in Beijing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and at that time, long distance, when telecommunication wasn't that connected as we are now, so we have lots of challenges and issues.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But look, let's also a little bit fast forward. So obviously, you joined SysTech in the early days. You've built that, helped to build that company, helped to expand abroad, and then most recently, obviously you joined BookMyShow. And how is that? I mean, obviously it's another change. Obviously you're developing a new product, as you were saying before to me. So I'm curious to hear how is that going?
Well, so it's a different journey. So in SysTech, it was more B2C. So the focus at the time, the vision, in fact, I remember the tagline was connecting people to entertainment. So it's all about B2C.
I see.
Yeah. So that journey ended, and I feel that the future might be one where promoters, venues, attractions, they want more control of their own ticketing.
Yeah.
So I find that a B2B2C approach would be the future. So that was my vision when I joined BookMyShow, that I think that's the future, and we need a brand new product that can support that kind of vision. So that was how we started, and we built the system, and we completed. We went live pre-COVID, fortunately. And despite COVID, we've got quite a few clients that have signed up, and we are in the midst of going live with some of them.
Fantastic. No, but look, I was actually just chatting with Martin earlier. and he was saying that, you know, obviously COVID is not good for our industry, but on the other hand, we're tech companies, and you know, and you can still continue building the product, right? So like the engineers, they never stop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the good thing. So from some perspective, you know, what happened, and we'll touch on it in the next section when we'll talk about more the impact of COVID. But I think it's interesting to see that, you know, all of us probably continued building the product, right? But probably in some maybe different directions, or deeper in a direction that you were already doing, but it didn't stop us from that, right? I mean, it probably stopped us for running events and selling them and operating and seeing us in person, but the tech team probably will still be very, very busy, right?
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, sometimes if you look at it from the positive side, the tech team are less distracted, because you see, when you're running an event, you will always have some changes that you require the tech team to adjust this, modify that. But you know, then the main goal of the roadmap that you wanted to build sometimes got distracted, derailed. But because of COVID, they've got all the time that they need to focus on that roadmap that we have put in place. So in a certain sense, it was a lot more focused, and we were able to build faster whatever we had in mind.
True. Developers don't like to be distracted. No, look, this is very interesting, and we'll talk in a bit about the COVID. So I think just to recap a little bit, you know, we have with us today Kenneth Tan, who, you know, is a pioneer in the ticketing industry in Asia. You know, started with Sysdig many years ago. Will not specify the amount and the number of years, but build up, you know, the first, I would say, you know, as he said, the real-time ticketing company in Asia, and then obviously moved from B2C to more B2B ticketing with BookMyShow. So we'll reconnect in 5 minutes to talk more about, you know, the impact of COVID and how it changed our lives. So stay tuned. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is Ilya from PouchNation, and you are at Event Tech Asia podcast. And I have a special guest with me, Kenneth Tan from BookMyShow. Hi, Kenneth. How is it? Yeah, welcome back. So we've been just chatting a lot about, you know, your personal background. So we discovered that, you know, how you've been the pioneer in the industry and how you built, you know, the first real-time ticketing company. And, you know, but then we continued discussing where, you know, how the COVID situation impacted us, obviously in a not nice and fairly unpredictable way. So I wanted to kind of dig a little bit more and understand, like, what were your like first thought when you know, heard about COVID? Like, what happened? Did you imagine it would take that long to recover? Did you kind of try to anticipate? Were you guys ready? Tell us more what happened internally within BookMyShow.
So my first reaction when the lockdown happened was not again, because I lived through SARS in 2003.
True.
Yeah, canceled so many events, went through all those refunds. So when it happened again this time, you know, that was the first thought that came to mind. Then we were quite focused on figuring out, so what does COVID mean for us and for our clients? And because we went on the path of a B2B2C, so we thought that perhaps that might be a good time for the venues, the attractions, to regroup, relook at whatever they have, and perhaps they be open to looking at demos from players like us. So we took the opportunity to really go out there to show our clients that, you know, what we have. And we were pleasantly surprised that partly because of COVID and partly because sometimes the timing was right, they had more time to evaluate, they had more time to look through.
Yeah, you can get more attention, right? So that's what I also find, because people are less busier. Is that correct?
Yeah. And because they have more attention, they describe their wish list and they find that, oh, we were able to satisfy some of these wish lists quite well. So that's how we managed to actually still close some deals despite COVID. And because B2B2C, the sales cycle is longer.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like a B2C where you put an event on, you start ticket sales. So B2B2C takes some time. There's a lot more requirements gathering. Sometimes there's a tender. So during COVID, we've been really busy doing those things.
Yeah, no, and B2B also, to a certain degree, it's a lot more predictable as a business, right? So obviously, as a ticketing company, if you have a B2B2C, so you sign somebody up, so you know that it's a constant volume. So you probably need to hunt less events, right? Because if you're just doing B2C ticketing, it's a constant hunt for the largest concert, right?
Exactly.
And you always like, okay, who's gonna get it? Who's gonna give the best deal, right? But in a B2B, it's more really, I would say, more a product play, right? That whether your product can really be the best product in the market in terms of satisfying all the requirements and really working hand in hand with clients, right?
That's right. That's right. I would say B2C to a large extent has become like the red ocean.
Yeah, very true.
Very bloody. Yeah. You know, all the cuts and margins, and in some cases, some promoters even given money to pass the show to those players. Yeah. So whereas like you rightly pointed out, B2B or B2B2C, the clients are more particular about whether you have certain features and you're able to handle their requirements. So it's not just about price, it's about how good your product is and whether it is able to satisfy their needs.
Yeah, and I find it very fascinating how the ticketing industry actually evolved in Southeast Asia, I would say, over the past 5-6 years, right? So we had at the beginning, it was like B2C, and then, you know, you had the e-commerce guys came in, extremely aggressive in buying shows and offering a lot of money, right? And then obviously, like the ticketing company had to evolve, and also knowing that the e-commerce is, sure, you can buy online, but they don't have the real infrastructure like as a ticketing company, right? And they might just have the front end, but on the back they are not prepared, right? They don't have seating softwares, they don't have access control, and I think that's why the B2B strategies is really makes sense a lot, even maybe working even with hand in hand with them, right?
Yeah. So that's why we didn't call it a B2B, we call it a B2B2C. And the first thing that we need to be comfortable with is collaboration. So correct. You rightly pointed out, there are a lot of new players in the market, and they are not the traditional ticketing players. But because they have a huge database of customers, they've got deep pockets of marketing dollars, they are rather appealing to the promoters.
Correct.
So even though the promoters may be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes of the ticketing operations, or maybe lack of certain things that, you know, these new players is able to do, but they're willing to take the risk. So where we thought we play a good role is we are the glue that connects all of them together. So by being the B2B, we satisfy what the venues and the promoters want. And by being the B2B2C, we openly connect to these partners. And it doesn't matter that, you know, they are also competing with us, because we don't see them as competitors, we see them as partners, because ultimately it's the promoter that decides who I want to use for my ticketing. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be one player.
Correct.
If for whatever reason they think there should be these three parties, for this party is strong in that area, that party is strong in another area, then so be it. We should help the promoter rather than insist that, you know, because we are a B2C, you need to use us. So that's our philosophy, and hence the B2B2C play.
Yeah, no, and completely with you on that point, right? I think I'm always for cooperation rather than competition. I think our industry is already not an easy industry, right? So if people you know, start competing with each other, it just really becomes like a red ocean, and you know, it's a lose-lose game, right? Everybody loses. So I think it's just a matter of specializing and adding value, as you mentioned, to the promoter in different areas, right? So maybe somebody can add more you know, value in terms of distribution and reach, but somebody can add more value into actual tech that, you know, that the promoter need to manage the events. But also curious, back to the, you know, to the past 18 months, I mean, did you guys obviously with the pandemic, you guys develop new products in terms of, like, I don't know, we looked at online streaming. Obviously many ticketing companies have that. Did you try to evolve a little bit more, or you just stick with the product that you had before?
While we continued our roadmap to build a B2B2C product for not just events, but for attractions, clubs, and all sorts of ticketing consolidated in one. Yeah. At the same time, we actually also did connectivity to video streaming platforms, so that
Okay.
You know, for those of our clients who wants to move from the offline to the online, we have that service. So we've tried out with quite a few clients, from virtual concerts to virtual theater shows to hybrid theater shows where there's a physical part and the virtual part, all with rather interesting results and very good learnings for us as well, and not just for the clients. Yeah.
And how do you see, like, I'm just curious, how do you see this engagement? Obviously, I've been talking with in previous episodes in terms of, like, you know, if you do online streaming, obviously you can do it for conferences versus you do it more for music events. You know, and also this is for the audience to understand, like, events is a very broad term, right? But in our business, you have, you know, sporting events, you have conferences, you have exhibitions, you have music events, you have you know, festivals, right? And all of them are very, very different, right? So where, in terms of when you launch this kind of streaming service, where did you see the most traction among those different, like, verticals, and what were the learnings?
So initially we launched this to help our clients, which are mainly in the entertainment and leisure space. But along the way, we had medical conferences contacting us and said, oh, can you do that for us? And I remember it was in Indonesia. So it turned out quite well. So they had medical clinics using our space. So I suppose for online, it's not so clear anymore whether, you know, whatever you're developing is meant for the leisure industry, but because it is the same platform, it can be used for the medical as well. So yeah, we did both sides, but I think we spend more time on the leisure and entertainment.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously something that, you know, intrinsically everybody, you know, while you're closed at home, you still want to have fun, right? So entertainment, I would say, you know, it's a basic need that we cannot escape, right? It's like, you know, having drinking water, or, you know, having a good meal, you want to have fun, right? And that's why this business exists, and I think this business is not going to go anywhere, right?
yeah, it's all about the experience.
Correct. Just to before we jump into our next section, talking about the future, just wanted to kind of hear. I mean, obviously it was tough. Obviously, we all suffered in this industry. We all kind of, like, tried to support each other. Like, what was your, like, toughest moment, right, where you said, "Oh my God, this is really, really difficult for me"?
Well, when all the promises that were made from your clients suddenly got delayed by more than 1 year.
Okay.
And then that's when you got to look at your budget and say, okay, all these things you got to postpone by 1 year. It's almost like you need to go into an hibernation where the revenue is concerned.
Yeah.
So that, I'm sure, is painful for all of us. You know it's going to happen, but it's just
when it happens, it really hits you, right? Because you start, you see how you're bleeding, and you cannot do anything, right? So you cannot really force clients to open, because it's you know, government restrictions, right?
Yeah. And even they said, no, we're definitely going to do this, just that we just have to do this maybe 9 months later or 1 year later. Yeah,
no, and 9 months, obviously, you know, for them, they can wait, but, well, to a certain degree. But once you're running a business, you know, you have staff, you need to pay salaries, right? And if money is not coming in, obviously it's becoming very, very tough. I mean, including ourselves. I mean, we had to, you know, I think for me the toughest moment was really when you have to lay off, you know, some of your employees, right? And with whom you built strong connections over the past, and they have delivered amazing work. But, you know, if the business is a tough game, right? Especially if it's not growing, right? So that was probably for me as well, like, one of those moments where I said, oh my God, I need to get over it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, we will reconnect just in a second to talk a little bit about more positive stuff and the future and how the markets are reopening. So stay tuned, guys. We're having today with us Kenneth Tan from BookMyShow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Ilya from PouchNation, and I have a special guest with me today, Kenneth Tan from BookMyShow. And we are at our last section for today, talking about the future and the reopening of events. So we've covered a little bit about Kenneth's background and how he's built ticketing companies from zero almost in Southeast Asia, how he successfully survive the pandemic and keep persisting in building a new generation product in the more what we call B2B2C space, which is really probably the future of ticketing in Southeast Asia. And now we want to hear more of, I mean, how do you see the situation at this moment? Obviously, Asia is a little bit behind, US or Europe, but do you see, things are reopening, things are happening? What's your take on that?
I have this tendency to compare with what happened during SARS and how the events bounce back with almost like a revenge.
True.
When SARS ended, and it was a very short run. So initially I thought this COVID situation would be the same, but now I think it's going to be a more gradual approach. So looking at how the various governments are opening up, there's a lot of caution, and also the cases of COVID are not exactly reducing. So there's also discomfort in the ticket buyer's mind. Yeah. So even when we started doing some events in Indonesia, we just opened up, ticket sales were much lower than what we expected of an event of the same nature. So that tells us that people are still a little bit cautious, and especially after being at home for more than 1.5 years, you kind of got used to Netflix a little bit more, got a little bit more lazy.
True. Hopefully that's gonna change, right? We all hope for that, right? So
yeah. So I think it will change. But it will not be a big bang where all the pent-up demand would just all rush out to buy shows and events, and even the events themselves returning would also be gradual. Yeah.
And do you think that it's going to be more like, okay, I've been at home, I'm slowly doing my steps, so I would go for maybe smaller events first, maybe outdoors, and then to larger? Like, do you see it happening in that way, or how do you foresee it?
No, I think, first of all, I think that events that are coming back, it would depend on what is available and possible to travel and do the quarantine and whatever needs to be done and still be viable. Yeah. So firstly, it depends on what the promoters can bring back to the market. And then I think from the consumers and the ticket buyers perspective, it depends on what they are allowed to do. So like now in Singapore, it's restricted to 2 seats, groups of 2. So that kind of limits certain things. And if you've got a group of 4, you might be a bit discouraged. So it depends on what might be the limiting factor. And if, let's say, everything is totally open up, then there's no restriction, then I think the bounce back will be quite fast.
Yeah. But I also heard that, for example, in Singapore, like, the big annual events like Christmas Wonderland and they're actually still going to go ahead this year. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. In fact, Christmas Wonderland happened last year. We were doing the
exactly. They never stopped, right? they never stopped.
Yeah. So they went on a time slot basis and did their best to make sure that it's limited to only the numbers that the government allowed. So we created, I think, at least 10 time slots a day.
Wow. Okay.
Half an hour time slots. So, half an hour, get out, next group come in.
In and out.
Yeah. And that was really, really successful. But then the ticket prices were also really, really low. And I think last year, that was probably the only event that's happening. So there was a lot of pent-up demand. But I think for next year, there'll be a lot more events. So there are more choices for consumers. So I think, yes, I think it will come back. It will be a gradual uptake.
And from obviously we run tech companies, and from a tech company perspective, like, do you see that technology has to adapt, has to change? Like, for example, obviously there are some protocols that everybody's dealing with, and this is also something we've been talking internally, right? Shall I integrate with all these apps that the government is pushing to the masses, right? Should I not integrate? Like, how would the journey work? Like, would people need to be vaccinated before entering events? Is it going to be like checked before they buy the ticket, or they buy the ticket and then suddenly they haven't read the terms and conditions and you need to refund? I mean, how you see the technology play a role in that in terms of when the massive reopening is going to happen?
So initially, when COVID first started and events were still happening, we were discussing, remember, about what are all the technologies that the government likely need us to put in place, and we went far extremes in terms of various wild ideas. But 9 months to a year later, I realized that most of these technologies actually happen at the operations level, on site, and when advanced sales is concerned, it's more of reminders and asking the customers to take that you did notice this, terms and condition that we are asking you to agree to make sure you're okay with the PET test, you're okay with this, you're okay with that. So it ended up not having a lot of sophisticated technological change. Well, at most, maybe collecting information on a per ticket basis instead of per transaction.
Yeah.
Which we have implemented in our system. So we are able to allow the promoter to say, if you need to collect information on a per ticket basis, we can do that. Yeah.
Yes, that makes sense. Obviously, just for the audience, when you have a ticketing company, sometimes you want to buy five tickets, 10 tickets all in one transaction, right? And sometimes you want to, as a ticketing company, you want to facilitate that fast sale. So you just want to do one checkout and you don't require all the details. But obviously with COVID, having the individual, information is sometimes required by the government, or at least, it can, you can implement those health protocols easier in that way.
Yeah. Then virtual streaming, there might be some use for virtual streaming technologies. So after all the trials that we've done with some of our clients, one thing that we feel may not take off in a big way would be virtual concerts.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
that is probably, the experience is still not yet there, right?
Yeah, and ticket buyers will be wondering, okay, what's the difference between going on, say, the OTT platforms to watch a concert versus, this virtual concert by this artist? Of course, there are exceptions when you have that very popular K-pop,
like BTS, for example, right?
BTS and all. For most other concerts, the trials that we've done, the events that we've done, showed that it's not exactly the kind that would take off. However, for theater shows, there's an interesting element of a hybrid.
Okay.
And some of the theater companies told me, when we sold tickets for them, they said they actually garnered regional audience who would not have traveled to the country to watch the show. But because they got interested, and the virtual streaming is actually interactive, so it's not just one way. So when you make it interactive, it becomes a little bit more interesting. It's no longer just watching on Netflix or any of the OTT platform. So I think those technology that help facilitate that kind of online interactive experience, I think those will stay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So obviously, the whole part of entertainment is, not just passively absorbing it, but being able to interact, share your, your experience with your friends, and that's why those platforms that can facilitate that more, are probably will have a wider audience. But I'm also curious, like, BookMyShow is actually quite unique because you guys don't only cover events, but you also work with cinemas, right? How has that been working for you guys?
The cinema industry has been quite battered, unfortunately. And even like you mentioned, Indonesia and Malaysia is opening up.
Yeah.
They're restricting only the vaccinated to go into the shopping malls.
That's correct. That's correct.
And the cinemas are in the shopping malls. And we recently, we also do concert movies distribution. So we recently distributed the Blackpink movie.
Oh, really?
To the cinema. Yeah, and Blackpink audiences are young.
Yeah,
and
they will try to get anywhere, right?
Yeah, and we've got feedback on social media that the malls are not allowing them to go in.
Oh, really?
Because they're not vaccinated yet, and so it will take a while for the cinemas to be able to bounce back, unfortunately.
Yes, true, true. I know, and I agree. Like, I mean, our example in Indonesia, I observed you always have to have that vaccines, even though obviously the larger cities, like for example, Jakarta in Indonesia, they are catching up with the vaccines quite fast. But obviously, there's still restrictions for like people like below 12. I think they cannot get the vaccine, and that's obviously a problem, right? Like, if you have a very young audience, and then they just cannot, enter the mall, and then
and if you have a family show, then the parents can bring the children. Yeah.
And also, look, also interesting just to also share with the audience. So you guys obviously you do ticketing for events. You guys do ticketing for movie theaters, and you also are you guys still engaged in bringing content to Southeast Asia, because that was one of the also distinctive factors of BookMyShow, right? You guys really brought a lot of shows. Is it still part of your business?
I would say we usually work with partners whenever we do that. Obviously, that has been put on hold for the past couple of years when the pandemic hit. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so we're still asking us the same question: when can we move ahead with some of these shows that we have already booked previously?
Correct.
Yeah.
But I found it, personally, I always found that this integrated approach is very, it's very interesting, right? It's like in entertainment, you're kind of integrated across that value chain, right? Where you have access to content, you have access to technology, obviously there's sponsors, right? So that integrated approach, I think Love Nation obviously is doing similar, like has been quite successful in other countries, right? So I think we'll see how it's going to evolve, but I'm sure there's a lot of hungry people out there for great content and international content, right? Which might take a while to get in, but still, I think the demand is there.
Yeah, but we are mindful that see, unlike Live Nation, we are B2B2C provider. So we provide our technology to clients who are promoters. So we are mindful to be collaborating rather than competing. So that's why I said even for the shows that we do bring in, it's always in collaboration with the right partners, the right promoters to do it.
Fantastic. Look, this has been very insightful, Kenneth. Thank you so much for sharing. Before we close, I just have a last question for you, like for our audience. 3 predictions for next year. What would be like if you wouldn't be able to see the crystal ball for next year, right? What would be your 3 predictions? Let's try this game.
Well, I think live events would only come back, international live events. I think it will only come back in the second half of next year.
Okay.
So maybe it might be a trickle here and there in the first half, but I think it's likely the second half. I feel that more venues, promoters would want more control of their ticketing. So the traditional way of the B2C might be diluted because more promoters say, I want more control. The third is that I think the e-commerce and the non-traditional ticketing companies, they're here to stay. Like it or not, for us traditional ticketing companies, you either embrace that or you compete. So my prediction is they will be here to stay.
Yeah, I agree with you on the e-commerce companies. I think especially, they are exiting the pandemic a lot stronger than many other players, right? So because, obviously, when you're stuck at home, you buy everything online. And, we've seen players like, C and Shopee, and, they've been doing incredibly well. So I'm sure that the secret for us, people in the industry is obviously to collaborating with them and making sure that each of us adds its own value, right? I think that's also to me very important. I don't think they are great in getting that reach and that promotion, but obviously the expertise in running events and in the technological like back end and all that is very different than an e-commerce fulfillment website, right? So okay, we'll pause it here. So I think this was great, very insightful. I think our audience would love all the insights that you shared. So thank you again, Kenneth, for being with us, and keep in touch.
Thanks, Ilya, and Thanks everyone for listening in.
All the best. See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Bye. All the best.